In the third step, if you want to add income level and perception of social support besides religiosity and happiness. Hello everyone. In this video, we will explain what hierarchical regression analysis, also known as ordinal regression analysis, is and how it can be done with SPSS. First, let's start by explaining what hierarchical regression analysis is. Below we see the hierarchical regression analysis. Above, we see multiple regression analysis. Hierarchical regression analysis is actually a kind of multiple regression analysis. That is, we are trying to determine the effect of more than one independent variable on one dependent variable. Exactly the same as in multiple regression, we investigate the effect of independent variables on the dependent variable. But there is a slight difference from multiple regression. In hierarchical regression, we do not include independent variables in the analysis as a single model, as in multiple regression. Instead, we group the independent variables in an order of importance that we determine ourselves, based on the literature, and include these groups in the analysis in several successive steps. So, we build several different models and do the multiple regression that way. This analysis is called hierarchical regression or ordinal regression. As the inclusion of independent variables in the analysis, that is, the establishment of models, is done step by step according to a certain order of importance. For example, here we have divided the variables into three groups as we see them on the screen and perform the analysis in 3 steps. Thus, instead of a single model with all independent variables, we are testing 3 different models created from independent variables. However, we determine the effect of the variable here on the dependent variable. This is our first model. In the second step, we add the second group to the first group and together this creates our second model. We determine the effects of the independent variables in the first and second groups together on the dependent variable. In the third step, we add the third group to the first and second groups. This is our third model. We are trying to determine the combined effects of the independent variables in the first, second and third groups. In fact, the third model is the same multiple regression we did earlier. So why do we divide it into steps? That is, models. Why don't we do a single multiple regression? Because in this study, it is important for us to see the effects of our independent variables according to the groups we have separated. Just a model that includes all of them is not enough for us. We would like to see different variations as well. Do the effects of other independent variables change when one argument is included or removed? How does the disclosure rate of the dependent variable, namely, R², change according to the models? We use hierarchical regression because we want to detect these as well. If we don't have such a purpose, then we only need to do multiple regressions. Let's give an example so that the issue will be better understood. For example, we are investigating the reasons that affect life satisfaction. We consider these reasons as religiosity, happiness in the family, income level and perception of social support. In other words, we think that these may have an impact on life satisfaction. If, in your opinion, these reasons are not in an order of importance and you do not intend to identify the differences between them, then it is sufficient to perform multiple regressions. However, if you first want to see the effect of religiosity on life satisfaction, then if you want to determine this effect by considering religiosity and happiness in the family together. So if you want to see whether happiness in the family changes the effect of religiosity and whether happiness in the family contributes to life satisfaction, use this analysis. In the third step, if you want to add income level and perception of social support besides religiosity and happiness in the family, so that you want to see if they create a change in the previous model or if you want to see their contribution, then you need to use hierarchical regression. This is the main reason and logic of hierarchical regression. Now let's see how to do this analysis in SPSS. But first of all, there are some prerequisites that must be met in order for the analysis to be carried out. These need to be checked. These prerequisites are the same as the prerequisites for multiple regression analysis. Therefore, we will not be checking them again here. You can access our multiple regression video by clicking the link on the screen and watch how the prerequisites were tested in detail at the beginning of that video. Let's just point out what they are here. 1. The dependent variable must be a continuous variable at the level of interval or ratio scales. Independent variables may be categorical. 2. All the variables must have a normal distribution. 3. The relationship between the independent variables and the dependent variable should be linear. 4. There should be no multicollinearity between independent variables. 5. There should be no extreme values. 6. The errors of the estimations should be normally distributed. 7. Variables must be homoscedastic. 8. Errors must be independent of each other. Let's assume all of these are provided and let's move on to the analysis. To perform the analysis, we first come to the analysis menu. From here we come to the regression. Under regression, we come to linear regression. When we click here, the window you see on the screen opens. Here, our dependent variable was life satisfaction. We can see it here. We transfer life satisfaction to the dependent variable part here, and after that we will start to transfer our independent variables to this part in order according to our model here. First of all, in the first step, we only want to determine the effect of religiosity on life satisfaction here. Therefore, we select religiosity here and transfer it to the section on the right. Once we've done that, we'll move on to step 2. In the second step, we want to add happiness in the family to the religiousness. How do we do this? Click on the next button here. When we click on this, we see that the section here is empty. Now the variable we added earlier remains in the previous step. In the next step, we add the variable we want to add. Here we add happiness in the family to this section. If we go back to the first step, we see that there is religiousness in the first step, and in the second step, we see that happiness in the family is added in addition to religiosity. We perform the analysis by adding the variable here on the previous variable. In the third step, we will include the income and social support variables in the analysis. For this, we press next here again and move on to block 3. That is, we go to the third step. This time, we drag both income and social support on the right side here, and then we see that the variables are included in the analysis at each step. After completing the third step, we need to make some markings from the following section. First of all, we can enter the statistics section and ask for the confidence interval option from here. We want the regression coefficients to be given to us with a confidence interval of 95% soon. So if we did this analysis 100 times, we want to see in which interval the coefficients we would find in 95 of them. Then I want to see the R2 change, because we want to see how the R² value will change when we switch between models. And we want to see descriptive statistics by clicking here. We do not tick other options, because when we want to test the prerequisites, we need to tick the options here, but we will not examine them at the moment, assuming that we meet the prerequisites. Then we press the continue button here, and then there is no different action that we need to do. We don't change the method here either. We want the enter method to stay because we want the variables included in the analysis together at each step. Therefore, we do not change the enter method here. When we click OK, our report will be produced. I pressed OK and our report appeared on the screen. First, we see the descriptive statistics table. Here we see the arithmetic mean, standard deviation of each variable and how many participants were included in this analysis. We see that the participants here are quite low with 10, but we did it this way because it is an example. In fact, at least 30 or more participants are expected to be able to conduct such an analysis. Then we see the correlation values. We see correlations between variables. Moving on to the main results of our analysis after that, we see that we first determined the effect of religiosity on life satisfaction in Model 1. In the second model, we see that happiness in the family is added to religiousness. In the third model, we see that social support and income are added to the variables of religiosity and happiness in the family. Then we come to the model summary table. This table gives us very important information, gives summary information about the model. This information is the R-squared and adjusted R-squared values you see here. The difference between them is that when we want to generalize to the population, we use the adjusted R-square value here. If we are not going to make such a generalization, then we use the R-square values here. What does the R-squared value here mean? The variance explained by the model on the dependent variable, in other words, expresses the power of the independent variables to explain the dependent variable. Here is the R-square value. This is the adjusted version of it. When we examine the R-square values here, we see that the first model explains 79.5% of the dependent variable. That is, religiosity explains 79.5% of life satisfaction. When we add happiness in the family, religiosity and happiness in the family explained 94.1% of life satisfaction. In other words, we can say that 94.1% of life satisfaction is due to religiosity and happiness in the family. When we add income and social support, which are our other independent variables, to this, the rate of explanation of life satisfaction rises to 98.5%. Therefore, as the variables are added, we see that the percentage of explanation on the dependent variable here increases. We can also see this change here. Here we see the R-squared change expression, that is, the change in the R-squared value. First of all, there is 79.5%. We can see this value here as well. Here, there is an increase of 14.6% and we have reached the value of 94.1%. In the third step, there is an increase of 4.4% and the value of 94.1% increases to 98.5%. Here we see this change. We can also see here whether the models have a significant contribution. Here we see the changes in the p-value. We see that the model has a significant contribution because there is a value less than 0.05 here. Here, too, we see that the model has a significant contribution. Also, if we look at the ANOVA table here, we see that the first model has a significant effect in explaining life satisfaction. We see that the second model has a significant effect in explaining life satisfaction. We see that the third model also has a significant effect on explaining life satisfaction. Our most important table is the coefficients table you see here. In the table here, we first look at the first model. In the first model, we see that religiosity has a significant effect on life satisfaction, and we see that the effect here is positive. Because the value here is a positive value, the regression coefficient here is a positive value. Therefore, we see here that as religiosity increases, life satisfaction also increases and this increase is significant. Here, we see between which values the coefficient is in the 95% confidence interval. At the 95% confidence interval, the value of 1.26 here ranges from 0.74 to 1.79. However, the actual coefficient is 1.26. Here we see the second model. In the second model, we see that happiness in the family is added to religiosity. And here we see whether the effect of these variables on life satisfaction is significant. When we pay attention here, we see that the effect of religiosity changes from meaningful to meaningless when happiness in the family is included. Happiness in the family has a significant effect. In multiple regression, the relationship between independent variables can change the significance values here, and we see this situation here as well. When happiness in the family is included in the model here, we see that the dominant effect of happiness in the family and the effect of religiosity on life satisfaction have disappeared. The results here give us these. Here, we see again whether the effects here are positive or negative. The effect of religiosity is still positive. That is, as religiosity increases, life satisfaction also increases. Happiness in the family is also positive, and we see that the value here is more than religiousness. Then we can make the following comment. Happiness in the family has a greater effect on life satisfaction than religiosity. We can comment that the power of happiness in the family is greater. When we examine the third model, we see the effect of all the variables on the dependent variable here. When we examine the significance values this time, we see that the effect of religiosity on life satisfaction becomes significant again as a result of the interaction of the variables. We see that the effect of happiness in the family on life satisfaction is still significant. We see that income does not have a significant effect, while social support also has a significant effect. So we see that there are quite a few differences between the models. For example, when religiosity and happiness in the family are considered together, the effect of religiosity here is meaningless. But when social support is added to it, the effect of religiosity becomes meaningful again. But income has a meaningless effect. Social support also has a significant effect. By looking at the models here, we can make different interpretations and write them in our thesis or article. Therefore, by performing hierarchical regression analysis, we reach very different results beyond just performing multiple regressions. With the addition or subtraction of the variables, we have completely determined what kind of change there is in the effects on the dependent variable. If we also interpret the coefficients here, we see that the highest power here is in religiosity. When we try to determine the effects on life satisfaction by including the four variables here in the analysis together, we see that the highest power here comes from religiosity, followed by happiness in the family, followed by social support, and income, but the effect of income is not significant. Thus, we explained what hierarchical regression analysis is and how it is done. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, you can ask in the comments section. I wish you success in your academic studies and see you in the next videos.